Hello everybody, how are you guys? We're here in Colombo, the Sea Bus, Columbus, Ohio, my former town. And yeah, I would say secondary hometown now, because I'm here a lot. So guys, we're doing a video series on communities around Columbus, and today we're gonna, in this video anyway, we're gonna talk about Carroll. Now Carroll is south, let's say east of Columbus proper, outside the 270 outer belt, and Carroll has an interesting history. I didn't even know about Carroll, to be honest with you, because I didn't really spend that much time in that part of town when I lived here. However, at the gym, somebody heard me talking on the phone to my producers and about this video series, and they say, "Hey man, you got to talk about Carroll." So I don't know if these guys are experts, in the area, but they're local, because the guy had on a Buckeyes Forever, Wolverines Never t-shirt, which indicates his Buckeye loyalty. So let's assume he's right. Carroll is very interesting. It's founded in 1820, and settled in 1820, incorporated in 1825, which is a long time ago for Columbus. And it's interesting because that was not the original name. The original name was Blue Danube, and they named it after a river in Europe, and the original settlers were from that region. Well, that makes sense. But the Carroll name comes from Carroll O'Connor, who was a famous actor who played Archie Bunker on a show called This Is My Way. No, a show called All in the Family. And so the reason that they switched it over was because people were tired of tourists coming to Blue Danube and wanting locals to sing that song, Blue Danube, which was, of course, also a famous song. And so what would happen is tourists would come from miles around and want let's say the street sweeper, the police officer, the crossing guard, to sing the song with them. Now this is a song by Jonathan Strauss II and Johannes Brahms, the Blue Danube Waltz. And some tourists would want locals to start dancing the waltz with them in the streets of Carroll. Okay, now I think communities. I've done a number of these community profiles, guys, and I've become I'm on my way to becoming an expert on what makes a successful community. I'm not there yet, but I'm seeing patterns. And it's good if locals take an extra step to make their community unique and engage tourists. Even though they can be annoying, they can trash the place, they can drink too much, they can be obnoxious. They're the ones that are going to go back to Omaha. They're the ones that are going to go back to Australia, to England, to upstate New York, and talk about your town. So unfortunately, they're a necessary evil to get the word out and to grow your town, at least if tourism dollars are important. Now, Carroll didn't necessarily care about that, or at that time, Blue Danube, but because so many people were coming there anyway, they said, well, what should we do? And the answer really is to engage that, to steer into the turn, so to speak, and make that a feature of your town so that you get more tourists. Now, I can see you shaking your head. You say, well, no, we don't live in a small town in the southeast part of Columbus just to have more people come here and mess up the place. We came here to get away from people. I totally get it. One thing I liked about LA, it was just so big, you could kind of disappear within the millions of people, and you didn't really have to talk to many if you didn't want to. And there's so many people in LA you just do not want to talk to. Because they'll talk about one thing, and that's themselves. So the people at Blue Danube said, listen, we got to disengage. We've got to get back to the small town life that we know and love. So let's change the name of the town and erase all of this Blue Danube nonsense so that people driving here from Columbus in their Teslas and their Range Rovers and their Jeep Wagoneers turn around and go back to C-Bus. Well, if you are a mayor or a head of the Chamber of Commerce or any kind of growth-oriented local person, that pains you to have to face that reality or to walk away from tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars in community development from tourism. So it took a while. It took a few years, but in, what was it? Let me look at my notes. 1961, they changed, is that right? No, I'm sorry. Looking at my notes, 1975, I was writing this while I was on the treadmill, so the writing is kind of jumpy. In 1975, they changed the name to All in the Family, to Carroll, in honor of Carroll O'Connor from All in the Family. And the reason they did that is the show was very hot right then. And they said the show represents not necessarily his character, who was kind of an obnoxious guy and not always politically correct, but they said the show itself reflects the type of hominess and family orientation and small community. In this case, they were in New York, but it was a neighborhood. A lot of the characters were from the neighborhood in that show. That they wanted to capture that feeling again, and that's why they named it Carroll. And, that seems to work for me. Carroll has a lot of charm to it, I think. And they changed it in 75, which was right in the middle of the All in the Family run from 71 to 79. It's a pretty long run in those days. And Carroll, as a quick aside, Carroll O'Connor had his own restaurant in Beverly Hills. I think it was Carroll's Place, I think it was called. But then he got sick when he got older, and they closed it after he died. But or maybe they closed it before he died. I can't remember. But so that's the town of Carroll. I sort of have mixed feelings about it because I love unique towns. And when your town is named Blue Danube, and you have tourists coming away from as far away as Japan, and they want to start waltzing to the Blue Danube waltz with the lady that collects the coins out of the parking meters, or the guy that cuts the hair at the barbershop in this little uptown there. It's something's unique about that. You couldn't, if you tried to orchestrate that. If you were a growth-minded small town and you said, let's do something crazy so that people talk about it, and so they say, hey, have you seen that little town that has the Blue Dan? You just couldn't get that going. And they already had it down there in Carroll. They had a Instagram-ready, social media-friendly community and a hook. Okay, we didn't have social media then, but nonetheless, it created a buzz. That's a better way to put it. And they walked away. So you have to kind of honor that, even though it's painful. Like it's kind of like when I have had girlfriends that said, listen, I've got to walk away, but it's for the better of both of us. And at the time, when I was throwing ketchup and mustard packets at them, and if it was a Mexican restaurant, hot sauce at them as they backpedaled out the door, I'm like, I still love you. I love you. Come on. And I throw the packets as some kind of weak attempt to try to get them back, like they're going to get hit in the shoulder by a hot sauce, and go, oh, I'm going to change my mind. I changed my mind, Joe. Now I see the error of my ways. My initial impression that you had mental problems has been completely fixed and changed now that you're throwing hot sauce and ketchup at me. But that's when I was younger. That was last year. So I understand when things change and people just have to. It's kind of like when Dave Chappelle walked away from his TV show and $50 million. People are like, "Are you crazy? Are you crazy?" Well, he did what was right for him. He was getting away from his roots as a stand-up and was becoming a thing. And he didn't want to be a thing. He wanted to be a stand-up. And I've seen him several times at the Punchline in San Francisco. The guy is a natural and a genius. He really is. So, just like Dave Chappelle had to walk from big money, so did the community of Blue Danube here in southeast of Columbus in favor of changing their name to Carroll, which does not garner near as many tourists. Now, they still have people driving down, but it's usually in the summer, and they come up to a local and they say, "Excuse me, do you know where Blue Danube is?" Because they haven't heard. They know they know Blue Danube was somewhere near there, but they haven't heard that it's a completely different town, right? They think it's nearby Carroll. See what I mean? And locals have been trained, and this came up in a city council meeting. They said, "Let's train everybody in town." So when people say, "Excuse me, do you know where Blue Danube is?" and everybody is supposed to say, "It's in the past, ma'am. Blue Danube is in the past." That's what they say to keep them from trying to start dancing. Because what happens with tourists, because these days they want to be Instagram famous, if you say it's in the past, here's what will happen. They'll still want to do the Blue Danube waltz with you if you're a local, because they need something for their social media channels. Some of these obnoxious people are not going away, especially if they're from Michigan. The Michiganders are probably the most obnoxious. The Ann Arbor types, the University of Michigan, the Wolverines. I mean, they come down here and they're like, I don't care if it's in the past. I want to waltz with a lady that takes the coins out of the parking meter, and I'm not going home to Michigan until I do. Now, they might not overtly say that, but that's what they're thinking, guys. And so they'll tend to force themselves and start dancing around, and the rest of the Michigan fans, they'll start humming the Blue Danube waltz, and they'll record it for the gram. All right, and never mind the pained expression on the lady who's being danced with against her will. Okay, they don't seem to know. They don't seem to, you know what I mean? They just want to dance. And how many shots of Jägermeister they've had already, even though it's 11 o'clock in the morning, nobody knows. But anyway, that's just an aside. What I'm trying to say is we need to honor people that want to change, and certainly that town wanted to change despite their gold mine, in my opinion, of being a town with a quirky name that hooked into a famous waltz that created lots and lots of cash flow. In my opinion, it was a tragedy, because that's a gold mine that other communities would cry for, would cry. So guys, that's what I learned from somebody on the treadmill next to me as they explained all this. I'm not 100% sure if it's all true. They did have some socks on that said Buckeye Nation. So I assume they're from the area and they seem to know, and I'm just relaying it to you. And the reason I talk to these people is because most of these tourism vlogs and blogs, they just skim the surface, whereas I'm getting down and talking to the people in the nooks and crannies, the local people, the real people, okay, people with receding hairlines and expanding waistlines like you and me. Not the TV-ready models that you see on these travel shows. Even though they pretend to be just regular people, they can't be regular people when you're in a 9.9 out of 10. Because you haven't been treated like a normal person your entire life. Whereas I'm a 4.7 out of 10, and I've been treated like a real person most of my life. There was a couple of bright, shining moments where I was treated like a star when I scored the goal to win against Dowling in 1978 hockey for Valley High School. But that was a brief. That lasted what, about 45 minutes till everybody left the Pizza Hut. You know what I mean? Having the celebration pizza. But I digress. So there you go, guys. That is another Joe Ditzel parody community spotlight. Come back for more. We're going to have so many cool stories coming out of Columbus and other Ohio towns and any other place that strikes my fancy. Talk to you then.